In 1994, the football world watched in shock as Diego Maradona, one of the greatest players of all time, was escorted off the World Cup pitch. His eyes wild and unfocused, and little did we know, this was just the tip of the iceberg in football's dark history of doping. Football is meant to be a sport of skill, strategy, and fair play, but beneath the surface lies a darker reality. One where some players and teams have sought victory through chemistry rather than talent. From individual transgressions to state-sponsored programs, the world of football doping is as shocking as it is widespread. In this video, we'll journey through the history of doping in football, expose some of the most infamous scandals, and examine the systematic issues that have allowed this problem to persist. So, let's get started. Doping in sports is not a new phenomenon, and football is no exception. In fact, the use of performance-enhancing substances in football dates back to the early days of professional play. In the 1950s and 60s, when testing for banned substances was virtually non-existent, players often relied on stimulants like amphetamines to enhance their performance on the field. These pep pills were seen as a way to combat fatigue and increase alertness during matches. One of the earliest documented cases of doping in football occurred during the 1954 World Cup. Rumors circulated that the West German team, who miraculously came back from a 2-0 deficit to win 3-2 against the heavily favored Hungarian team, had used performance-enhancing drugs. While never officially proven, this incident planted the seeds of suspicion in the football world. As the sport grew in popularity and commercial value throughout the 60s and 70s, so did the pressure to perform. The 1980s saw a shift in the types of substances being used. Anabolic steroids, which had been popular in other sports, began to make their way into football. These drugs promised increased muscle mass, faster recovery times, and improved endurance, all crucial factors in a physically demanding sport like football. It wasn't until the late 1980s that football's governing bodies began to take serious action against doping. UEFA introduced mandatory and systematic doping controls at all stages of its tournaments in the 1987-88 season. FIFA followed suit, gradually increasing its anti-doping efforts throughout the 1990s. As we moved into the 21st century, the fight against doping in football intensified. In 2006, FIFA finally ratified the World Anti-Doping Agency Code, becoming the last Olympic sport to do so. This marked a significant step forward in the battle against performance-enhancing drugs in football. Despite preventive measures, players still use performance enhancement substances, one of the most infamous cases in recent history, the Adrian Mutu scandal. In 2004, Mutu, then playing for Chelsea, tested positive for cocaine.
And the Dane's got a good cross back to Mutu! Unlucky Mutu again, yes!
Consequences for Mutu were severe. He received a 7-month ban from football and had his contract with Chelsea terminated. But the story doesn't end there. Chelsea sued Mutu for breach of contract, seeking to recoup the £15.8 million transfer fee they had paid for him. After a protracted legal battle, Mutu was ordered to pay Chelsea £14.3 million, a ruling that effectively ended his top-flight career. Next, let's talk about a case that shocked the football world due to the stature of the player involved, Diego Maradona. The Argentine legend had already been banned for 15 months in 1991 for cocaine use, but it was his expulsion from the 1994 World Cup that truly captivated global attention. Maradona tested positive for ephedrine, a stimulant that can increase alertness and reduce fatigue. The image of Maradona being escorted off the pitch, his eyes wide and unfocused, became one of World Cup history's most iconic and tragic images. But it's not just players caught up in doping scandals, even managers haven't been immune. One of the most surprising cases involved Pep Guardiola, currently regarded as one of the best managers in the world. In 2001, while still a player for Brescia in Italy, Guardiola tested positive for nandrolone, an anabolic steroid. He was initially banned for 4 months, but the case dragged on for years. Guardiola maintained his innocence throughout, and after a series of appeals and counter-appeals, he was finally acquitted in 2009. While Guardiola was ultimately cleared, the case highlighted the complexity of doping issues in football. It showed how even the most respected figures in the sport could find themselves embroiled in doping controversies, whether through intent, negligence, or simple misfortune. While individual doping cases are concerning, they pale in comparison to the systematic doping issues that have plagued football. These large-scale operations reveal a darker side of the sport where the pursuit of victory has led entire organizations to engage in widespread coordinated doping practices. One of the most alarming examples in recent years is the Russian football doping scandal. In the lead-up to the 2018 World Cup, which Russia was hosting, a series of revelations shook the football world. Whistleblowers and investigative journalists exposed a state-sponsored doping program that included football players among its beneficiaries. The scandal first came to light through the testimony of Grigory Rodchenkov, the former head of Moscow's anti-doping laboratory. Rodchenkov revealed how Russian officials had systematically covered up positive doping tests and swapped out tainted urine samples for clean ones. While the focus was initially on Olympic sports, it soon became clear that football was not immune. In 2016, the McLaren report, commissioned by the World Anti-Doping Agency, confirmed these allegations. The report found evidence that over 1,000 Russian athletes across 30 sports had benefited from state-sponsored doping between 2011 and 2015. This included members of Russia's football teams. Despite these revelations, the response from football's governing bodies was arguably inadequate. While Russia faced sanctions in other sports, including a ban from the 2018 Winter Olympics, the football team was allowed to compete in the 2018 World Cup. This decision raised serious questions about FIFA's commitment to clean sport and its willingness to confront powerful footballing nations. The consequences of doping in football extend far beyond the immediate penalties of bans and fines. The impact ripples out, affecting players, teams, fans, and the very integrity of the sport itself. For individual players, the consequences can be career-ending. Take the case of Adrian Mutu, which we discussed earlier. His doping violations not only resulted in bans, but also led to a legal battle that left him with a £14.3 million debt to Chelsea. This financial burden, coupled with the damage to his reputation, effectively ended his top-flight career. The health risks for players involved in doping are significant and often overlooked. Many performance-enhancing drugs have serious side effects, especially when used long-term. Anabolic steroids, for instance, can lead to liver damage, cardiovascular problems, and mood disorders. EPO, while increasing endurance, thickens the blood, increasing the risk of heart attacks and strokes. Players who dope are essentially gambling with their long-term health for short-term gains. For teams and clubs, the repercussions of doping scandals can be severe. When a player is caught doping, it's not just the individual who suffers, the team may be forced to forfeit matches or even titles. They may face fines, point deductions, or even relegation. The financial impact can be enormous, with lost revenue from competitions, decreased ticket sales, and fleeing sponsors. In response to the ongoing threat of doping, football's governing bodies have implemented a range of measures to detect, deter, and prevent the use of performance-enhancing substances. FIFA, in collaboration with the World Anti-Doping Agency, has established a comprehensive anti-doping program. This program includes both in-competition and out-of-competition testing, which is crucial for catching dopers who might try to time their drug use to avoid detection during matches. One of the most significant advancements in recent years has been the introduction of the biological passport. This tool was first used in the 2014 World Cup and has since become a staple of anti-doping efforts. The biological passport creates a baseline profile of an athlete's blood and urine over time. Any sudden changes in these profiles can indicate doping, even if specific substances aren't detected. For the 2014 World Cup, FIFA collected blood and urine samples from all players before the competition and from 2 players per team per match. These samples were analyzed by the Swiss Laboratory for Doping Analysis, setting a new standard for comprehensive testing in international football. UEFA has also stepped up its game. Since the 1987-88 season, anti-doping controls have been mandatory and systematic at all stages of UEFA tournaments. In the 2006-07 season alone, UEFA carried out 1,662 tests in and out of competitions, including 938 players tested for EPO. As we have journeyed through the dark underbelly of football, from historical context to major scandals, systematic issues, and anti-doping measures, one thing becomes clear. Doping in football is a complex and persistent problem that threatens the very essence of the sport we love. However, this fight against doping is far from over. As long as there is pressure to perform at the highest level, as long as there is money to be made from sporting success, the temptation to dope will remain. The responsibility to maintain the integrity of football doesn't just lie with governing bodies, it's a shared responsibility that extends to players, coaches, medical staff, and even fans. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Have doping scandals affected your enjoyment of football? What more can be done to combat doping in the sport? Share your views in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until then, keep supporting clean sports and stay informed. Thanks for watching.